We're gonna put this thing back together. I've been waiting on a bearing for like days. Here's my new bearing that goes in there. First thing is this slider for the shifter has to go onto this gear, and it's got 3 little dogs, 1, 2, 3, that fit in 3 little notches. Thusly. I've greased up the little bearings. I'm going to slide them into position. Okay, now I've tapped this gear and it's a little tight. I used a 3/8 extension, but you probably don't want to try this at home. You want something brass or something that won't chip the gear, but I was lucky and I didn't chip the gear. And now I've got a little spot I've got to put a snap ring. I have a new end gear that the synchro goes into. I probably didn't need this. The other one was okay, but I bought it anyway. This goes in, these little notches go into there, and then this thing has to go on. And it's kind of a tight fit. I had to use a puller to take it off. This is the snap ring that came out of it. Now it needs to go in a little bit more. Okay, this gear has to go on far enough to get the snap ring in. It probably would have been better to heat it up. I don't like banging on it because I'm probably banging on the bearings and everything. You know, I'm about over this transmission. I just got to get it put together. All right. There. Into 5th gear. See, before it used to just spin, and this is out of 5th gear. I've got this little deal here. It's 2 halves, and they go over onto this shaft. They cover those splines, and they keep that snap ring from coming off. They're like 25 bucks. You can get them online anywhere. Put a little Loctite on these. Loctite jars are like one-use items. You open them, and they spew out all over. You wouldn't want this thing to come falling apart, or it would cause havoc. Alright, the collar's on. When you tighten it, kind of keep this gap even so it's, you know, sitting on there pretty square. I've done all I can do to keep that snap ring in now. If it pops out now, it's on Jesus's hands. I've cleaned the gasket surface off, and I put a new paper gasket. Previously there was just silicone here, so now we're ready to put this end housing on. I've got it all cleaned off, and I've remembered to take this spring and ball out, so I'm not fighting that. And that just kind of goes on there. Alright, so I'm going to put the rest of the bolts in. I asked the auto parts kid. He'd never even heard of Permatex number 2. And he didn't think they had it in the store. But we looked around and we found it. I don't know, maybe this stuff's outdated. Anyway, I put a little on these threads. 2 things it does. It keeps it from falling out. And you never know what's going to leak. Most of these go through, all the way through. So it's not going to leak. But then again, maybe it will, so you don't know. So you put a little goop on these threads, you won't have any seepage coming out. I'm putting in this spring detent for the shifter. A ball and a spring, I've already got it in there. And then you tighten it. Let's see. Okay, now we're going to put the shifter shaft back. This little recessed end goes up. There's a second hole that goes to the back. So this thing kind of goes in about right there. Now I got to go up top. This is the shifter, and I'm going to put it in there. There's the shifter shaft, and it goes like this. The shaft slides in, but it's going to take 2 hands, so I got to put the camera down. Okay, the shifter's in. It's got to fit in those shifting yokes down there, so you just kind of feel it around. You got to have 2 hands. One hand you push the shaft while you fit the other thing in. The nut goes on. Next is these little spring-loaded jobbies. They go on either side to give your shifter that spring feel. I put a little Permatex on the threads. You probably don't have to, but I just hate things leaking and having to come back and do it again. Alright, so this thing is all set up. The shifter handle goes into this. It's like a ball joint. Okay, I put a little schmutz on this. The little plug for the shift shaft, and that goes right in there. Yours won't be all screwed up like this because some jerk took it out with a punch instead of the right tool. I guess he didn't have an Allen that fit it. I got an Allen that fits it, so I don't have to use a center punch. Although I'm not above using a center punch. Now we're ready for the transfer case. When I took this transfer case off, it had 5 studs and 1 missing, and I thought it was broken. But if you look in there, it's actually a plastic plug. They're not using that stud. Now, if you got the 6-cylinder, apparently you get the 6 stud with it or some crazy thing like that. But the transfer case on the AX-5 4-cylinder on a 92 only has 5 bolts. The case to the transmission is sealed here and it's sealed at the other end, so this is like a little dry area. You know, you still want to put a little silicone. There is no gasket for this in my kit, so you want a little dab of silicone. Just keep water and dirt out of there. There is a weep hole, if I don't know if you can see this right here. If your trans seal starts leaking tranny fluid, it's going to start running out here. If your transfer case starts leaking ATF, that'll start running out of here. So at least you'll be able to tell which one's leaking. I've sprayed a little white lithium grease on this seal and on this shaft. Once the oil gets in there, it'll start getting in everything, but just for the initial startup so it's not dry. We're going to use a belly lift for the transfer case. And a belly lift is you set this thing up on your belly and then you kind of bench press it up into position. Let me find the holes. I think it goes like this. Maybe not. I gotta turn it a little. Those splines gotta line up. Oh, this freaking rolly thing rolls too much. There. Okay. Now, I had a couple bolts handy, just so the thing doesn't fall back down on you. And I have to put the shifter tower in because the transfer case shifter uses one of the nuts that holds the transfer case on. It's like, you know, it all has to go together. Okay, we got the transfer case. This gets one of the bolts for the transfer shifter. There's a vent hose. Gotta go on. And there's this vacuum thing goes on, and that's when you put it in 4-wheel drive, that vacuum sends a signal up to your front little decoupler thing for the passenger side front, and it locks it in, so then you got 4-wheel drive. Don't forget your speedometer. It plugs into the back of the transfer case. That's the level. You want to get it to where it just starts running out there. I'm using Pennzoil Synchro Mesh. A lot of people don't like it, but it says here meets GL3 AP blah blah blah, and that's what this transmission is supposed to have. So I'm going to put it in from the top. Alright, I'm putting the sheet metal back under here. I put that collar back. You put it in, you twist it. It's kind of a two-handed operation, so I can't show you on the camera, but it's like a twist lock. And then I put the little rubber booty back. Now I got this rubber booty going on and another one over the top of it. I put some weather stripping under this to seal it under there where these screws go, so you don't get fumes back up. My transfer case shifter, there's a spring-loaded clip thing that clips onto this square with these little deals. Anyway, that was all broken and someone had just glued it on there with silicone. So I've made a couple holes with bolts with a little step. And that step fits into that groove. So I'm going to put a big blob of silicone, slip it on there, and tighten these 2 bolts. Alright, there it is attached. It's full of silicone. Got 2 screws in it. Now it's not wobbly loose like it was. Alright, I got the plate back on. I put new screws in it. My shift knobs are kind of dull, so I got one of those headlight refinishing kits. It looks a little better. Alright, I got the front drive shaft on, and it's tied into the transfer case. Putting on the new transmission mount. This little doohickey here is for a muffler hanger or exhaust hanger. It slips into that thing and clamps onto this pipe, but I don't have it. I need to get that one day and put it in there, and it clamps onto this header. And it's good because it moves with the transmission, which moves with the engine better than being on the frame. I gotta put this skid pan underneath. We're gonna fill the transfer case up, and that's the drain, that's the fill. And this takes ATF red, and ignore this bottle. It's just the way I'm putting it in. I got this spout, and I just squeeze it right in. That's 5th gear, Big Daddy. 5, count 'em.